Hi, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in a minute or two as we wait for people to join us. All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining SCORE Akron this morning. Welcome to today's workshop, Nonprofit Basics. Al Morrison is going to be presenting today. Just so you know, later today you will get an email from me that will have the slides that are being presented today, along with a video recording for you to review. That is also, it's a link to our YouTube channel, so you can always review any of our other workshops there or on our website. We are always wanting interaction from you guys, so if you want to raise your hand, type questions in the chat or the QA, please do so. Al usually pauses periodically to see if there are any questions, and then I go through and catch them up through the chat. So with that, Al, I will hand it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Not-for-Profit Basics. As Laura said, we invite questions, type them in the chat as we go along. And if you've got a question, there's a really good chance somebody else has exactly the same question but hasn't typed it in yet. So don't be bashful. Our plan for this morning is take a minute and tell you about SCORE so you know what we're all about. Answer the question, what is a not-for-profit? How do you govern it? How do you manage it? How do you finance it? How do you set it up? So we'll take you through that. And by the time you leave, you should have a complete understanding of what is a not-for-profit, why is it different than a for-profit, how do I set it up, how do I run it, what do I have to worry about, and answer questions. So let me tell you about SCORE. SCORE is a national organization founded in 1964 as a partner of the SBA, or the Small Business Administration. Currently, we have about 11,000 volunteers spread over 220 chapters across the country. Here locally in Akron, we serve the Summit, Medina, Portage, Wayne, and now Mahoning counties with over 35 mentors to serve you. And historically here in Akron, we've served over 50,000 clients, helping them start a business, run a business, grow a business, manage a business, and in many cases, sell a business. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities. And we do that through mentoring and for education. You're participating in one of our educational programs this morning. And our vision, long-term aspirational vision, is that every person, every business has the support they need to thrive. We've been doing this for a long time. I don't know if we'll ever get to every person in every business, but we're certainly going to try. The mentoring we do is one-on-one. It's free and it's confidential. That's really important because it is free and it is confidential. You can meet with your mentor face-to-face or phone or email or video. We do it all. And if you just have one simple question, we'll answer for that and maybe we're done. But I have clients that I've been working with for the last 12 years. We don't meet very often, maybe twice a year, but relationships can be just one meeting or as long as you want to make sure your business thrives. You're participating in one of our workshop webinars this morning on not-for-profit basics, but as you can see, we have many others. And to get the complete list, go to akron.score.org. You can see our schedule and you can sign up for that workshop right then, right there. And if you want to have a meeting, you could either go into akron.score.org or call our office and get in touch with a local mentor. Either one works. So remember, you're going to get a copy of these slides so you don't have to write this down. Okay, what's a not-for-profit? not-for-profit is an organization that's founded to further some public cause. So some need that the community has that you can serve. And you're given not-for-profit status specifically to serve the community in which you work. And therefore, technically, the community owns the not-for-profit. So it's not owned by individuals, it's owned by the community. And therefore, it does good for the community in which it's owned by. Nonprofits have usually been very successful in the US. In 2005, there were 50,000 obtained status. So 50,000 a year is a bunch. That's a lot across the country. And then in 2014, there we go. 64% were still functioning. So that says the success rate for not-for-profits is pretty good. Same in 1994, almost 30,000 got charitable status and 55% were still around in 2014. So they tend to have some staying power because they're providing a valuable service to the community. If you're thinking about starting a profit, I'd do a couple of things first before you get into it. I'd create a mission and a vision and pick your governing board. And if you're going to have staff, your staff. So you have a sense if you can get a governing board and if you can get staff, or if this is something you really want to do, what activities are you going to provide? So you should go into this with a clear vision of what are you going to do with this not-for-profit. You should look at all the costs and do some financial projections and what kind of money does it take to operate a not-for-profit, to get it started, to run it for the long term. And then ultimately you're going to want to register with the state. So if all of these is a yes and it looks like a go, then move forward. But I wouldn't leap right into the paperwork until I actually had thought it through. If this is something I really want to do and I can get it financed and I can get it managed. There's a variety of not-for-profit organizations. They can be charitable, educational, scientific, chambers of commerce, social clubs, health organizations. There's all kinds of possibilities for a not-for-profit. The most common is the 501c3, and that's an organization or a corporation that's chartered by the IRS. A for-profit is chartered by the state, whereas the not-for-profit is chartered by the IRS. It's a public charity. Here we have the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank in Akron. It's a public charity. Goodwill Industries, Summit County Historical Society, and foundations that give away money, but they're still, again, 501c3s. Akron Community Foundation gives money away, as does GIR. So there's lots of things that a 501c3 can do. So what's the difference? For-profits produce, market, sell products or services, and they do it to make money for the owners or investors. Well, for-profit, just like it says, is there to make profit for the owners and investors. Not-for-profits may produce, market, sell products or services to improve the community, but no individual owner or otherwise can profit from it, hence not-for-profit. The for-profit is funded privately by the owners or by stock offerings by the owners. The income and profit benefit the owners. It's governed by the owners, so the owners do what they want to with it to the benefit of the shareholders. It can be bought, it can be sold. If it's sold, the profits of that sales go to the owners. So it's all about making money for the owners in a for-profit business. Not-for-profit is exactly the opposite. It's owned by the community. There's no private interest or no stock, so no individual has any ownership in it. No one can personally benefit from the not-for-profit having earnings. Neither the board members nor employees or volunteers can benefit from that. Income greater than expenses is not called profit, goes back into the organization. So you would run a not-for-profit financially operationally just like you would run a for-profit. The difference is, what do you do with the money that's left over after you pay all the bills? With a for-profit, it can go to the owners. In a not-for-profit, it goes back into the organization, and we don't call it profit, we call it surplus. A for-profit is owned by the owners. A not-for-profit is governed and run by a board of trustees or a board of directors. If you decide to defunct your not-for-profit, it can't be sold for a profit that goes to anybody. If an organization goes out of business, the assets or the sale of it have to go to another not-for-profit. So it operates very much while it's operating like a for-profit, but the difference is, what do you do with the money that's left over? So the first decision as you think about it is, do you really want to be a not-for-profit, or do you want to be a for-profit? And there's a difference. And the reason for your decision should be that if you're trying to make money, then a not-for-profit is not for you, because you can't make money from it. If the primary reason is to do better for the community, then that's for you. You should become a not-for-profit if and only if you're going to rely on donations, government funding or foundations or grants. And just be aware that 30% of your income has to come from public support. So you can't run it like a for-profit, make and sell goods and make a profit, because 30% of your money of your income has to come from donations of some kind. In exchange for doing good for the community, the IRS grants you tax exemption. So you don't pay taxes on your federal, state, local sales tax or corporate taxes. That's good news. So you put more money into the community. The donors have the ability to deduct their donations on their taxes, and you have the ability to apply for grants. If you're a for-profit and somebody gives you money, they invest in it, they can't deduct it from their taxes because it's an investment, not a donation. And you can't apply for grants as a for-profit. So the not-for-profit has some significant advantages, and they're given those advantages so you can do good for the community. However, your not-for-profit does pay regular, ordinary local taxes like water, street cleaning, sewer, electricity, gas, Social Security taxes for employees, Medicare taxes for employees, workers' comp for employees, unemployment taxes, and withholding taxes on employee income. So you don't pay any income taxes, but you have to pay the taxes that you would normally pay as any other normal operating business. The not-for-profit has to be governed by a board of directors or a board of governors. So the individual, if you're starting it, you kind of lose control. Its purpose are limited to what the mission and vision is. Most not-for-profits can't take any kind of political position or do any kind of lobbying. And you are transparent. In a private company, you keep the books. Nobody needs to see the books but the owners. In a not-for-profit, those books are public. So anybody, including the press, wants to see your books, they can look at it. And the not-for-profit reporting requirements may be, depending on the form of your for-profit, may be a little more extensive than you would find in a for-profit. And again, those finances are public information. Again, the not-for-profit has to follow all the other regulations like zoning, occupancy permits. It has to meet whatever zoning regulations there are, federal regulations. If you're going to do food, they have to have a food license, just an operating business. They must comply with EEO requirements and OSHA safety and health. So you operate pretty much like a for-profit business. The only difference is what you do with the money after you pay all the bills. So there's a myth that not-for-profits can't make any money, and that's absolutely not true. Not-for-profits not only can, but should. And the profit is called surplus income. So the surplus income has to go back into services for the organization. It allows you to operate efficiently and effectively. gives you a chance to invest in services and take advantage that may come along. So if you're a not-for-profit and you stumble across an idea where you could buy 1,000 t-shirts for $10, but you don't have the $10 in the kitty, you can't buy the 1,000 t-shirts. If you're going to have a fundraiser and it's going to be a dinner kind of fundraiser, the venue will probably want money down. If you don't have money put down before you collect any money, then you may not be able to have the fundraiser. So a not-for-profit should be operated just like a for-profit. It should make money. The question is, what do you do with that surplus income? The answer is it goes back into the community, maybe not immediately, but sooner or later it will find its way back into the community. Okay, let me pause, stop, ask if there are questions on the overview of a not-for-profit.
Oh, there's a question on the difference between not-for-profit versus nonprofit.
There is no difference between the term not-for-profit and nonprofit. And I apologize, I use those terms interchangeably sometimes, but it's exactly the same thing.
All right, and we have a couple raised hands. Sarah, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Alec. A quick question on the slide where you discussed 30% of the revenue must come from the public. I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit. In the case where like starting a foundation, if there's like an initial grant of say $10,000, does that mean that it has to be matched by $3,000 more dollars? Or you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes, let me answer the question. So when you look at all the revenue you got in 1 year, 30% of that revenue has to come from donations. So let me come back to my t-shirt example. So let's say I buy 1,000 t-shirts and I sell them for $10,000. Now I have $10,000 in earnings. And if that's all I do, I don't meet the requirement. 30% of my money has to come from donations.
Right.
So I'm not really good at the math, but I'm going to say, let's say to make that work, you have to have about $4,000 in donations plus the $10,000 you made from t-shirts to get that 30% that came from those donations. It's not, if you don't, what happens is you have to pay taxes on that excess. So for the example of my t-shirts, I sell 10,000 t-shirts. I get no other donations. So I'd have to pay taxes on that 30% or that $3,000. So I keep my not-for-profit status on the 70%, but I lose it on that 30% that I didn't get in donations. Next question.
Hi, yes. My name is Jamie, and I am trying to start a recovery home. And I was wondering which way is the best way to go? Is it better to go nonprofit or profit?
I think that's a bigger discussion than we have here. So I suggest you get yourself an advisor or mentor because it depends on what you're doing and what you want to get out of it and why you're doing it.
Okay.
It's a much longer conversation.
Okay. But I'm in Cleveland. I just joined the Akron area because the Cleveland people who are assigned to Cleveland, I haven't been successful with gaining anyone. I've been trying to gain someone for like almost 2 months now, and I haven't been successful.
Call the phone number that we gave you earlier. Laura is going to answer it sooner or later. She will sign you up with an Akron mentor. All right, and we'll solve that problem for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
Okay, I have a few questions. Can you use income from other businesses you own to donate to your nonprofit?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great way to fund a not-for-profit is have a business and donate to a not-for-profit.
What are considered surplus income?
In a not-for-profit, you have income from donations or wherever it comes from. You pay all the bills, and the money that's left over would be considered surplus. It's the same way in a for-profit. After you pay all the bills, the money that's left over is called profit. In a not-for-profit, it's called surplus.
Let's see. Can your nonprofit coincide with your profit business as a way to give exposure to the nonprofit organization?
I think the answer to that is yes, but again, I would get yourself an advisor and talk about that one-on-one. The tricky part is there has to be an arm's length relationship between the two organizations, and people on the for-profit side can't benefit. Can't benefit from that relationship, so you have to be really careful about that. So that requires some discussion by somebody one-on-one to really understand what you're trying to accomplish here.
Does providing incentive items such as shirts and cups to the board count as income to those individuals?
No, it does not. Tchotchke items like cups or mugs or pens or whatever. I would just be careful about how much those were. I mean, if you had a gold engraved coffee cup that was $500, I think the IRS would frown on that. But if it's a $20 or $30 mug, there's not a problem with that at all.
Okay, what steps should I take to obtain a 501(c)(3) tax exempt status, and what common challenges should I be prepared for?
Great question. Answer that in another minute or two.
Okay. A question, I'm starting a church. How does that differ from a nonprofit?
A church is a form of not-for-profit. So the answer is it is a not-for-profit, or should be.
All right, let's continue on. Let's continue on because some of these questions might get answered
later. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on. So governing a not-for-profit is an important consideration of starting a not-for-profit. It has to have a board of directors or a board of trustees. Those names, again, are interchangeable, trustees and directors. Remember, the not-for-profit is owned by the community, and that board then represents the community. The board is the governing policy. It sets policies. They have financial fiduciary responsibilities. They hire, fire, evaluate, and review the executive director. And in the not-for-profit, the board is the ultimate authority. So all decisions of any consequence are made by the Board of Governors. So how does that work? So Jane Goodman's the owner of Little Tots Daycare Center. Jane Goodman is the owner and operator. She has all of the operational and governance responsibilities. The employees work directly for her, and she makes all the decisions and puts all the profit in her pocket. But let's say she decides to found a Little Tots Daycare that's a not-for-profit. Well, the first thing that happens is she has to have a board of directors that sets the policies and the directors. There needs to be on that board a president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. You may have other officers or other policy or other committee heads. And now Jane could be the executive director, and the operations report to her. But if you notice, the board of directors makes all decisions. So in theory, they could relieve Jane of command and hire somebody new. So that's entirely possible. So that's one of the considerations as you begin to start a not-for-profit. Is this a position that you want to hold as the executive director? As the executive director, you would be paid a fair wage, market value wage, but you make no decisions that like the board would make. If you decide you don't want to be the executive director and you're the founder and you sit on the board, that would be fine too. But again, as you sit on the board, that's an unpaid position. So boards of directors do not get paid not-for-profit. Okay. As you set that up, in Ohio, you have to have 3 directors or trustees. You need to have enough to do the work, whatever the board is. If it's fundraising, is it expertise? Is it time? Is it talent? Is it treasure? I always recommend an odd number so that you don't have a tie. I don't recommend friends or relatives being on the board unless they have some specific expertise. There are some not-for-profits that have their friends on it, and that's not wrong as long as there's a valid reason for them to be on the board. And I also recommend term limits so that if you need to invite somebody off the board, they can term out, and they should be staggered terms. You don't want all of the board to have their term run out on the same year, so you have to replace them all. A nice cycle is a 3-year cycle, so every year, a third of the board potentially could roll off. You need to replace them, or they could stay on. But again, you want to have term limits. So nobody's on the board for life. Not-for-profits that I've seen get in trouble, the board members, some have been on for 20 years. And this is how we do it. And it doesn't no longer work in the community, but that's how we always did it. And that's how we're going to continue to do it. And there's no way to get them off the board because they have a life term. So as you build your not-for-profit, think about having term limits for directors. Good board members, as you think about picking them, they should be committed to what that mission is. What is your mission? They have to be willing to give time, talent, or treasure, or all 3. They should be able to influence others in the community to donate, have community contacts so they can help in fundraising, should understand not-for-profit boards, willing to learn, willing to help. And if you can avoid have board members that want to have their name on the list of board members but don't want to do anything. The board then is the governance of the organization. They make all the governing decisions, operational and financial. They set policies, goals. They hire and fire the executive director, set the salary for the executive director, and evaluate the performance of the executive director. So as you think about that, boards usually follow Robert's Rules of Orders. The decisions are usually collective, and if not, they're voted on or are always voted on. So the boards make decisions by vote usually. Because the board members make the rules, pick them very carefully. The board's the ultimate boss. Remember, they can hire and fire you. And if you're the executive director, you can't get rid of the board. Only the board can get rid of the board. And last but not least, make sure that the board members don't have any conflicts of interest. For example, if board member's brother owns an office supply store, you cannot, in good conscience, buy office supplies from the director's brother. That would be clearly a conflict of interest. So be careful of that. Having said that, now if the brother wants to donate office supplies, that's fine. Wonderful. You should have experienced people on your board if you can, because you may need legal information, financial information, marketing, PR, other information. So if you get those kind of people on your board, that's always helpful because they generally will donate their time for free beyond board meetings. So if you need legal work done, bylaws written up, it'd be nice to have a board member do that for free for you. You should probably have a nominating committee, and that's going to identify the personnel needs, new board members, identify new board candidates, do the recruiting of them and bring them in and orient them. So that should be a job of a nominating committee in the long run to make sure you have a steady supply of board members. The bylaws, and in the state of Ohio, there have to be 4 positions: president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. And you can only have one person hold 2 of those offices. So you have to have a minimum of 3 board members, which says you have a minimum of 1 board member holding 2 positions. And you can do that, but it's definitely not recommended, because if something happens to one of those board members and you need to have an official vote of the board, and one of them is no longer able to function as a board member, now you only have 2, you essentially are out of business. So just, you want to have some backup in your board. Other committees might want to have would be a governance committee, maybe an operating committee, maybe a PR committee, maybe ad hoc committees for events or something else. But there may be some committees of the board to do the work of the board. The board should meet, as often as you need. I would recommend 4 meetings a year, once a quarter, but legally you only have to have one annually. And if you're going to have a board meeting, you need to give sufficient time so the board members can attend. So you want to maximize their attendance and have an agenda and supporting materials go out ahead of time. Just to prevent any surprises on the part of the board. Okay, questions about the board? Or your board and a board?
All right. Upon setting up board of directors for the state of Ohio, if I am not mistaken, Ohio does not require the complete board to reside in the state. Is that correct? I have a 5013 and an EIN, and am in the process of building the board.
There is no requirement for residency. One might argue that that individual doesn't necessarily represent the local community. But if they could be helpful in some other way, maybe fundraising, there's no restriction on that. Next question.
Are you allowed to create a non-profit to help support your LLC? I would imagine there are conflicts of interest with that, but if your LLC is providing a service to children of the local community and you want to involve all the community to help pay tuition for the kids, etc., is that possible / legal to create a non-profit?
Technically, the answer is yes. Practically speaking, I would want to spend some time talking with one of our advisors about the potential conflict of interest and how you prevent that from happening. Because a conflict of interest that becomes public knowledge will essentially take your donor base and turn it off. If they say, nope, we're not going to contribute because there's a conflict of interest here with a for-profit business, and that's not how we decide to give our money. So I'd want to talk through that very, very carefully with what your businesses are, what you want, what you're actually trying to do. So please get a SCORE mentor.
All right, Rita wants to know, I can answer this. Are there any SCORE mentors in the Youngstown area? So the Akron SCORE chapter covers Youngstown now. There used to be a chapter there. It's no longer there, so we in Akron cover.
But to answer your question, I think we have 2 mentors that physically are in Youngstown. So I think one of them's not yet a full-fledged mentor, so we might have trouble providing that level of service. But if that's what you want, because you want to meet in person for some reason, then I would explore that further with our phone number.
Do you have a sample of board requirements for a nonprofit that you can share?
When you say a sample, I'm not quite sure what that means, but if you're looking for a template for bylaws, for example, they're all over the internet. If you're looking for a sample of duties of the board members, again, that's all over the internet. That's easy to find if you Google it. And if you really want to talk to somebody about it, get yourself a SCORE advisor and go to akron.score.org and get a mentor.
All right, we have had Tiara's had her hand up for a while. So Tiara, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize I had my hand up, but I did put the question in the chat. If you have registered a business as a profit, however, did not receive any profit, can you transfer that business as a nonprofit?
No, you can't change a business registration from one form to another, from a LLC to a C corporation or from an LLC to a not-for-profit. You can't transfer it. You have to essentially close the one and start a new one. The state of Ohio doesn't allow us to do that. I'm not quite sure why, but they don't.
Thank you.
Well, let's see, we got another question. Aaliyah, she's had her hand up for a little bit. Aaliyah, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hello, I just had
Yeah,
a similar question as well. How are you all today?
Good, how are you?
good.
Good, I'm doing good, thank you. So in regards to the nonprofit, when creating your business plan for your for-profit businesses that you intend to use the profits for those businesses to help donate to your nonprofit, is it wise to include that in your business plan? Because I know that some financial institutes cannot fund nonprofits. So if that's in the business plan, will that affect funding for the for-profit?
I don't think so, because they're not funding the not-for-profit directly. They're funding your for-profit, and you're using the profit from your business. So
Okay,
I don't think that's a problem. But again, I would want to be very specific about who that organization is that's buying services from your for-profit. And if they're not funding not-for-profit, I would want to tell them what you're going to do with your profits. Let's see if there's a problem there. And I always do that proactively, because they may say not a problem at all. It's your profit. You do with it what you want. But if they find out about it and you didn't tell them ahead of time, that never looks good.
right, okay. Got you. Thank you so much for that clarity.
You're welcome.
Are nonprofit always 501c3s?
No, there's a 501c4, there's 501c3, a 501c6. They all have different uses. Well, by the way, none of which I'm familiar with. But if you Google that, I'm sure you can find the answer, and the IRS websites would be more specific about what the various differences are. But they're all not-for-profit. The 501c is the IRS regulation that regulates not-for-profit.
And then do you have to have a 501c3 status in order to apply for a grant?
Yes. The grantors will absolutely want to see that documentation in the grant, because they want to be sure that they're donating to a not-for-profit. So if you don't have 501c3 status, then they would say, who am I donating to? The other thing is, without that 501c3 designation, the donation is not tax deductible. So if you're coming to me for a donation and I'm saying, well, I can't take it off my taxes, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to give it to my church because I can deduct that. Laura?
Can board members be employed by the nonprofit? How do you pay staff for a nonprofit?
The staff are paid like any other staff in any other organization, including a for-profit. It's the board members that can't be paid, that can't be compensated in any way. They have to be volunteers. They're volunteers representing the community. making sure that you're following your mission. So the answer is just like you can have a payroll, just like any for-profit business. You pay the executive director and you pay the staff. You would hope that a lot of the work is done by the volunteers, including board members, but in some cases it may be too large. So if you take any large United Way or Red Cross, they all have staff and they pay those staff just like a regular employee. I think you would find that in the not-for-profit world compared to the for-profit world, the not-for-profit doesn't pay quite as much because they're relying on your desire to do goodwill to make up for not paying them a lot of money.
Let's see. I plan to organize public-private partnership. Say that fast. Can I be in both the nonprofit management and profit? How can we ensure I don't have a conflict of interest?
Talk that through with one of our advisors, one of our mentors, because that each one is situation specific. So rather than give you some generalized answer which doesn't help you, I think you should talk to somebody, be very specific about how that's going to work, to be fair to you.
Our nonprofit is operating as a family with a mission to support a cause. Do you recommend adding non-family members to the board?
Absolutely. It's always good to have an outside perspective. Now, there would be exceptions to that depending on the mission of your specific not-for-profit. But I'm guessing that the family you're speaking of doesn't have all of the expertise you need to run the not-for-profit. If they do, that's great. But I'm thinking my family, and I don't think my family has all that expertise. I mean, I don't have any lawyers in the family. I don't have any tax people in the family. I don't have any finance people in the family. So I don't have any insurance people in the family. So it'd be nice to have those people, part of your trustee board or your executive director or directors board.
All right, let's continue on because then I think more questions will get answered.
Say that again.
I said, let's keep going,
Right.
and then we'll answer more.
Okay. Let me say. Okay. How do you manage a not-for-profit? Well, you manage a not-for-profit just like you would manage a for-profit. The CEO, executive director, reports to the board, doesn't serve on the board, doesn't get a vote. They can be there. They implement board policy. They don't set board policy. They may help staff all the committees, implement the programs or whatever they're doing. And they will then, if there's agency operations, they will supervise those just like any chief operating officer would. Hire and fire the employees, again, just like any chief operating officer would. So it's very much the responsibility of the executive director or to be the CEO and assure the operation runs smoothly. If you're going to hire people, you always want to hire great people, but great people here is defined as really understanding, what it is this not-for-profit's doing. So they have that passion for the mission, just like the founding executive director or founding member might have. If you need certifications, make sure your employees have certifications, and make sure the employees understand what it is the organization is supposed to be doing, because they're the implementers of whatever the mission is and whatever the board policies are. We have a technical glitch.
What's going on?
It has decided it does not want to change screens on me.
Oh, that's interesting.
Here we go. You should have a secretary as part of the organization, and they should keep records of policies, procedures, board meetings, minutes. They should keep all of those records. That would be the job of the secretary. In financing it, you always want to keep the finances of the not-for-profit separate from your personal or any other organization's books. If you have a finance committee, they would oversee that. They oversee the investments. The executive director prepares a budget, and then it's approved by the board. There would be written minutes of all the financial meetings. And the organization, not-for-profit, must operate within a budget. In other words, it can budget a profit, but it can't budget a loss. It can budget break even, but it cannot budget a loss. So as you put the budget together and you look at it at the end of the year and ask the board for approval for it, it has to be break even or better. It can't show a loss. That's one of the IRS regulations. So you don't want to get afoul of that one. The expenses of a not-for-profit might include salaries and benefits, your accounting fees, tax fees, fundraising expenses. If you've got a building or rent something, occupancy, legal fees, PR and marketing expenses. So they're all valid expenses, just like a for-profit. All of those expenses are perfectly valid in a not-for-profit. Okay, I'm going to stop, take a breath again, see if there are questions.
All right. Can a founder of a nonprofit be put on salary?
It depends on the position they decide to take. If the founder sits on the board, the answer is no. If the founder decides to become the executive director, then the answer is yes. If the founder decides to be part of the staff, the answer is yes. But if you're the executive director, you're paid at the pleasure of the board. So technically, if the board doesn't like you, they can cut your pay or they can fire you. The other choice is you could sit on the board and help make the decisions, but then the board member does not get paid.
I've registered my church with the Ohio Secretary of State and have received an EIN from the IRS. However, I may have to change the name of the church due to some technical issues. Is it necessary to change the article of incorporation and the bylaws as well?
Well, they all have to match the new name. And depending on how that works, you may have to re-register that new name as a different not-for-profit. I'm not sure. I've never done it with the IRS. I'm not sure you can change the name with the IRS. So I think you have to go back to square zero.
Can the COO or president vote if there is a tie?
Nope. Cannot. They're not a voting member. That's why you should have an odd number of board members.
Can the founder be the executive director and hold another role on the board?
No, they cannot. They're either the executive director or they're a board member. They can't be any combination of both. Sorry. That's the tricky part about starting a not-for-profit as the founder. Right? You've got to be one or the other. You can't be both.
How can you start a nonprofit and keep yourself at the helm indefinitely?
You can't. That's the problem. Therein lies the catch-22. So the answer is you can't do that. There's no legal way to do that. Sorry.
Are you required to have an executive director for a small organization?
No, you're not. If the work of the not-for-profit it can be done by the board members, then fine. You don't need an executive director. In fact, the one I'm associated with didn't have an executive director for the first 5 or 6 years of its life. In fact, I've been part of 2 of those organizations that started out without one. So no, there's no requirement to have one. It's when the workload gets to the point where the board members don't have enough time or energy to do that, that you need to hire somebody. You'll know when that time comes. You'll see it coming.
Oh dear, whoops, I lost it. Title wise is, did I read this one? Title wise is executive director and president. Are they considered the same thing?
Yes. The executive director is the, wait a minute, I take that back. I'm sorry, I spoke too soon. No, the president would be reserved for the president of the board. So the executive director could be the chief operating officer, could be the executive director, but the title of president is reserved for the president of the board. I'm sorry, I spoke too soon on that.
Can the board of directors receive gifts from the organization itself or other organizations? I think we answered that.
When you say gift, if it's something very small, like a pen or a cup or something like that, or a t-shirt, that's fine. But if the gift is in money form, like a gift card, the answer would be no. Or cash, that would be no. And although I'm not a tax person, I would suggest that if any gifts be somewhere in the $25 range. Much more than that, it stops looking like just a thank you kind of a gift. It starts looking like some kind of a compensation, and you definitely don't want that.
For a small nonprofit, can you be the CEO and founder?
Yes, you can be the CEO. No, the CEO in the hierarchy is the president or chairman of the board. That would be the chief executive officer, and that's a non-paid position. So you can't hold both. Again, that's the issue with the not-for-profit. If you're the founder, that sooner or later you're not going to be there anymore.
All right, you're all caught up.
Okay. Okay. In financing your not-for-profit, let's talk about the income that comes into the organization. It can be earned from fees or services or selling t-shirts, for example. It can be donated from people. You may have corporate contracts, and the corporations pay you for services. They can be government contracts or grants. You can do crowdfunding, special events, or in-kind donations. So you're going to do something and you get something printed, and the printing company gives that to you for free. So those are all very valid sources of income. So as you create your budget, you want to look at income and donations and estimate that, so you have a sense of what that top line is going to be. The donations have to be designated for a specific charity by name. It must be a 501c3. Your 501c3 must be registered with the Attorney General, because you are soliciting money in the state of Ohio. You may have to register that with your city or your county. It depends on the city or county where you're in, whether that's required or not. Donations have to be designated as either restricted or unrestricted. Restricted donations are restricted by the donor for a very specific use. Unrestricted donations, or undesignated, are donations given with no restrictions. You can do whatever you want with them. Restricted donations are, if you can avoid it at all costs, avoid the restriction. because sometimes it's very difficult to spend it in the way the donor wants. If they really feel strongly they want to restrict it, ask them if it can be restricted for a period of time. In other words, for 5 years or 10 years, and then it becomes unrestricted. Here's my favorite story. Little country preacher in Southern Ohio, works out of his garage, out of his home, does great work, but he's just a country preacher, doesn't have a lot of money, doesn't do a lot, works out of his garage. And one of his people that he'd helped died and left him $25,000 as a donation, with the restriction that the $25,000 be used to build a church. Now, the little country preacher can't build a church for $25,000. Anybody would know that. So he can't build a church. It's a restricted donation forever. So he can never spend it unless he builds a church. And he is never going to build a church. So what happens to that money? Well, absolutely nothing. If it had been restricted for a period of time, say 5 years, then it could be dumped into his general fund of unrestricted money. He could do something with it, help people, feed the hungry, whatever he might want to do. But as long as it's restricted to that church, that's all he can do with it. So there is a way around that. You can go back to the estate people, the folks that were beneficiaries, his heirs, and request that they unrestrict it. The problem is this individual died with no heirs. So there's nobody that can unrestrict the funds. So after a period of time, he got old, he died. And because the money then is unclaimed, the state takes it. So the donor that wanted to build a church never got his wish granted, never got it used for the purpose which he intended, which is to help this little country preacher. So just be careful about restricted donations. Donations, just out of courtesy, should always be acknowledged in writing. Donations greater than 250 have to be acknowledged, that have to be stated that nothing was given or received in exchange for that. In other words, it was a pure donation. No money was, or no benefit was given to the donor. Now, if there is something, so maybe have a fundraising dinner, then you have to acknowledge in that letter that some portion of that money was given in by the dinner, the food that was given off at dinner. So the whole donation is not tax deductible.
Hey, Al.
Yeah.
Is your screen moving on your end?
My screen moving? Yes. Mhm.
Okay, because it's not like your slides are not moving.
Did that move?
No.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which everybody, you will get a copy of the slides in a PDF, so you'll be able to see all of them after this.
So the slides are not changing on your end.
No, the last one that we have is expenses of a nonprofit.
So we obviously have a glitch in the system.
We do, unfortunately.
So what I'm going to do is kind of skip to the end and kind of summarize, if I can. The first question you have to answer is, what are you going to do? What is it your not-for-profit wants to do? The second thing, that how are you going to do that? Where are you going to do it? And who are you going to do it to? So you have that clear in your mind before you ever file for a 501c3. You should eventually put a business plan together so you have a sense it's going to make money. Have your board of directors figured out before you apply. And what I encourage people to do is download the 1023 application form from the IRS and start to fill it out. And what you will find is there's some things that you don't have an answer to. So before you go online and try to do it and then find out you can't finish it, I'd suggest you do it by hand on paper, get all your questions answered, and then go and do it once and done. So having said that, I'm going to stop and don't know and see if anybody has any questions, and we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Sorry for the technical glitch.
I know.
Who knows?
Christina wanted to know, is tax filing more complicated?
You must file every year a 990 with the IRS and with the Attorney General of the state of Ohio. So in that sense, it's not a lot more complicated than you would file, but you have to do that. And if you have absolutely no income and no expenses, you still have to file a 990 so that they know that you actually did file it.
Let's see. I have an LLC partnership since 2017, and I have a nonprofit 501c3 since 2023, and have a board. I have not had time to commit to getting the 501c3 going or searching grants, etc. I feel frustrated. I'm in a schedule with a SCORE mentor. Audra, that's great news. I am going to send you all the link in when you get the slides and the video. I will send you a link that will take you right to, it's a small questionnaire and it just asks for your information. Do you have an established business? What kind of help do you need? So you would put nonprofit, best way to reach you, etc. So that's the best way to get a mentor going, except for Jamie. Jamie Wright, we need to set you up differently because you've already done all that. Okay. When receiving a donation, what is the best way to document whether the donation is restricted or non-restricted? Maybe a receipt?
A receipt, a spreadsheet. The only thing you have to worry about is if they are restricted, then you need to keep a separate file on what the donation was, who it's from, and what is the restriction. So Country Preacher has to keep that $25,000 separate. He has to say it came from whoever it came from. It's restricted to building a church. So you need to identify that.
All right, we are caught up, Al. This was a very interactive group. Oh, one more. Does your business plan have to be a 10-page document? Can it be simple?
It should not be a 10-page document. And yes, it should be simple. Because whoever it is certainly not going to read a 10-page document. Your donor certainly won't. If you work with your SCORE mentor, what you'll do is create a business plan that is exactly tailored to what you need right then. Just it could be 2 pages, it could be 3 pages. It doesn't have to be an extensive document. There just needs to be enough detail in it so you know that the business is going to make money, you know what the business is going to do, and you can then explain that to your board of directors. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to make money. Here's how we're going to do what we're going to do. And it's a helpful document in recruiting board members. So
And also, oh, I'm sorry, Al, go ahead.
let's say then they know exactly what they're getting into.
We actually, Al is doing a business plan workshop on March 26th. If you guys are interested, it's not specific to nonprofit, but you will learn a lot. All right, I think we're all caught up, everybody. I will be sending you an email later today with all that information and a link to get a SCORE mentor because they are so useful. Al, thank you so much. I appreciate
Welcome,
it.
everybody. You have a good week, good weekend, and maybe I'll see you around the campus, so to speak.
All right, everybody. Thanks again.